I was looking forward to this ride because I wanted to test my climbing against stronger riders, and boy, were there stronger riders on this ride. Most everybody, and I mean most everybody, was either stronger than me on climbing and or on the flats. After a little bit of rest due to my filming a young woman I've been working with, Natalia, on her goal event, that video is linked in the description below. Check it out, a lot of drama in that one. I went on a ride with a couple of other stronger riders, and I was surprised on how my form had increased. And that was a good thing because I was supposed to have a road race this past weekend, which was canceled due to excessive heat, not enough people signing up, and some road work that created a fourth 3-mile gravel section. My first test of the ride came early, and that's what you're seeing right now. We're on a section of road called Bubblegum. It's about 1.7 mile, and it averages 2 to 3%. A little bit of undulation, but it's pretty steady. So far I've been maintaining 350 watts plus, or 300 watts plus, and so I'm just trying to stay connected to these guys to the top. I already let them know that we'll do a quick regroup at the store, just in case I come off. Which is a distinct possibility. For those of you that are familiar with me, I am 68, and I am also subject to atrial fibrillation. My sustaining this wattage to stay connected, I see that as a good thing. I'll view it even better should I make it to the top with these guys. Now you'll notice my heart rate is around 144 BPM. My max these days is in the low 160s. Since we're talking about climbing at the moment, my weight is down to 159 pounds. I'm 6 foot, half an inch or so. Using the mirror test, I'm pretty much where I want to be. I'm sure I can trim a little bit here and there, but I'm good. And even more important, my power hasn't diminished because of my weight loss. It was slow going, but I finally got there. I am happy to report that I made it to the top with the others. So now we're on the next test for me. This is a stepped climb coming up to the town of Prather, and we're on the first step. These steps last for about 4 to 5 miles. Now the guy backing me, that's Tom. He's clearly one of the 2 strongest riders on this climb. And in back of him is Natalia. I told her to ride this ride in whatever fashion that she wanted, that we were just going to do some stuff at the end. I just wasn't very specific. She elected to dial back a bit at this point because she planned on doing a 20-minute threshold interval on the main climb. Most of the rest of us did our thing, and our thing was following Juan, who was laying down some watts this entire 4 to 5 mile section. I made it connected to the top of the first step. Now the second step that we're starting now is actually a wall. It turns into a wall and then it lightens up to just steep. You're seeing now Eric drop back, and Eric is a good climber, but he's a lot better on the flats. My major concern on this part for me is that, one, I'll either get dropped on this steep section or it'll weaken me so much that I'll get dropped soon thereafter. Maybe I shouldn't call this section a wall, but the steepest part reaches 9%. Fast forwarding a bit, note that my heart rate is in the high 140s. It's starting to creep up. The grade, however, is starting to creep down. It already hit its 9% and is heading back down to about 4. Our little peloton has split up and we are now a group of 6. And most important to me, I'm one of the 6. The second step is the longest step. We are on the back end, just the steep section. Pretty much the only thing I'm doing is the thing that I should do, stay as relaxed as possible. I don't need to tighten up other parts of my body that I don't need that'll cause my heart rate to go up even a beat. Because right now I'm about 152 beats, and recall that my max is in the low 160s. Rather than jump, I'm going to fast forward so you can keep an eye on my wattage in the upper left hand corner. My FTP is around 270 watts, so that'll make the top of my threshold zone, right where the VO2 max starts, at about 285. Looking at the numbers at the top of the screen, particularly the heart rate, things seem to be getting a little bit easier. We're leaving the top of that second step. It flattens out a little bit, and now we're on the third step. It is short, but usually as it comes right after that long second step, it's a killer for me. And again, this is where I can get dropped. I'm doing what I can to stay with these guys because when I get over the top, I get into a sanctuary area. More specifically, there's a little bit of respite. Now it's only a little bit, and then there's another step that comes after that, another short step, even shorter than this, but I need to stay connected with them over the top here and over the top on the next one, or else they'll be gone and I'll be solo. And just over that second little bump, it's a little bit of downhill and some fast flats. Ignoring a bump at the very end, we are well into the penultimate step. This seems to be the easiest step for me, probably because I've come off the area of respite followed by a few undulations and bumps. All this even though I'm in my VO2 max zone. But if you notice my heart rate, it's dropped a bit. I had spoken a bit ago about that tough start to that second step. Well, this being the last step, there's a tough section toward the top because I think it only gets to 7%, but it seems steeper than that. It seems like a wall, and that's usually where I get dropped. The further we go up, the steeper it gets. Almost to the end. We're almost to the town of Prather. We are now down to a group of 4. You may recall earlier I said that Juan was leading us all the way up, and I was wondering about this time how he could do this, especially when we had an 80-mile ride ahead of us. Well, as it turned out, when he got to the top, that's pretty much all he intended to do. He turned back down with a number of others that also were intending just to go up to Prather and back. Right now, I'm just focusing on that rider in front of me, on Ronnie, and looking at his wheel mostly. I am doing everything I can to stay with him. If you look at the lower right-hand corner, in my rear view camera, you'll see another rider coming up. That's Jimmy. Now we're a group of 5. Earlier when I said that Tom was one of the 2 strongest riders, actually 3 strongest. That would be Ronnie, Tom, and Jimmy. Juan in the front is either riding out of his skin, or I need to recategorize that group of 3 to a group of 4. I have a little gap that developed to Ronnie. I am muscling this thing up now, and I'm getting it back onto his wheel. So after this section, we go down a little bit, and then there's a bump where I can get dropped because my body's just on the edge right now. But as it turns out, I stay with him all the way to the town of Prather. After we left Prather, I took the lead for the next 2 miles to get to the bottom of the next test, the 4-lane, an 8-mile climb. And this happened. I had 8-fib for about 5-10 seconds back there. In my 8 years since my first AFib attack, I've never experienced that situation before. As I've always said, what I'm doing is going to work until it doesn't. I was done with my 2-mile pull to get us through the tight road section, and we just turned on toward the 4-lane. We have just under a mile to go before the climbing starts in earnest, and that's when Natalia was going to start her interval, but she decided to, after I pulled off, to start the interval at that intersection. She took off like a bat out of hell. My intent was to be on her wheel, and then further test myself with the others and with her. Now I'm chasing her, and I am having a hard time getting up to her. It just seems like my muscles in my legs just aren't responding like I want them to. When I finally do get up to her, with her being 2/3 my size and weight, she's not a big windbreak, and my legs are hurting. I don't know why they're hurting so much. They just are, and I don't want to get dropped. I don't know why, but I'm absolutely struggling. I gotta let go of her wheel. Unbeknownst to me, Tom was on my wheel. As he fills the gap, that little bit of rest was just enough for me, so I get on his wheel. He's also a bigger windbreak. Right about that time, Natalia dials back just a bit. Later on, she told me that she started that 20-minute interval just a little too hard. As we start the actual climb, Tom has gone way ahead of us, and we never see him again, at least on this climb. There are 3 more in our reduced group, Jimmy, Maddie, and Ronnie, who are taking more of a conservative approach to this climb, at least for the moment. My desire to test myself in climbing, as I did in the previous 2 climbs against the others, has now diminished to the point of elimination. I am on a wheel, and I just want to stay connected to it. The main problem I'm having is that my right quad feels muscularly damaged. And this is not the first time. This has been happening for the past month or so, after I've been doing extended efforts, and I yet haven't figured out why. I kind of figure, hey, it's an old guy thing. After a few minutes, we're passed by Jimmy and then by Ronnie. It's just Maddie behind us. As each of them go by, I'm thinking, these guys would make great rabbits. But my leg is hurting too much. All I can do is hang on the wheel that I'm on. And just like in Tom's situation, we never see these guys until we get to the top. We are now 15 minutes into the 20-minute interval. Even though I'm riding her wheel, when she's doing threshold on a climb, that means I'm doing threshold on a climb. My heart rate's in the mid-150s, and that means I'm about the 95% mark. That means I'm breathing pretty heavy. That means she can hear me breathing pretty heavy. That's starting to mess with her breathing. She waves me on to get out of earshot. That means I've got to go a lot faster and get some distance on her. My leg obviously is not happy with that, but I can't interfere with her workout. My attempt to get distance on her only lasted for about a minute. Then she went to the front again. I get back on her wheel, of course not knowing why she had me go up ahead to begin with, I figure that since that's what she wants me to do, then that's what I'm going to do. Once I get back up to her, I surge as much as my leg will allow in order to get a bit of distance. This effort also lasts about a minute before I see her take the lead again. She is now about 17 and a half minutes, maybe 18 minutes into the interval, and I'm done. I reconnect with her after she slows, we cruise, Maddie catches up to us, and we roll to the top. What's not on the camera is us descending down this steep climb called Old Toll House. Being an old guy, I have old equipment. Their bikes are a lot more aerodynamic than mine, particularly Natalia since it's less than a year old. Even though she was descending like a rock, I had a hard time keeping up with her on the descent. I'm 50 pounds heavier than her, and I just couldn't figure out why. I'm doing over 400 watts on the flats just to try and get connected to them and not quite able to make it. At this bump, I lose contact with them, and they drop down into Humphreys. Maddie, who's on the back of my wheel, goes past me and then easily gets distance on me. Ronnie was hoofing it in the front, but still. I figure it's gotta be old guy syndrome. Once everyone, meaning me being in the caboose, reached Humphreys Station at the bottom, all the others cut across to make this about a 60-mile ride for them. Natalia and I continued on our originally planned 80-mile route, in which now the second part of our workout was about to commence. This part of our workout was going to be 2 sets of 3x10 threshold intervals. The purpose of these are to enhance end-of-race strength, and that includes endurance. Now the goal that she's going to be doing is 200 miles long, and it's a USAC race called Lotoja, or Lotoja. Basically it's from Logan, Utah to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. There's 10,000 feet of climbing, which for a double century is not that bad, but this is all within 4,500 feet to 7,700 feet. You better like riding at altitude. My intent was to ride her wheel on each of these intervals. On the 6 intervals that she did, the first 4 were done at threshold. She was starting to wear a bit, and since this was the first time she was doing this particular workout, I had her drop down to tempo for the last 2. Doing these type of intervals for the end of a ride, in this case at 65 miles, is tough. And for the first time that she was doing this, I thought she did quite well. You can see on the 4th interval where she started to degrade, and that's where I called the audible to go to tempo on the last 2. I, on the other hand, of course was not done with my leg problems. She dropped me on 2 of the 4 threshold intervals. It was during one of these dropped sessions where I thought of a reason why I was having the problems I was having. Being an old guy, I have old equipment. I have a Campy front brake in which there's a spring which returns the brakes to the original position after you release the lever. That spring broke a little over a month ago. I haven't had any luck finding a replacement spring, so I had to find a new set of brakes, and fortunately I found one at a good price. Those should be here next week. I hope you enjoyed this video and you got something out of it. Remember, check out that video in the description below. As always, remember, comment, like, subscribe. The Cycling Greek.